Hello and welcome to the 11th in our 16-week series of audio-enabled EDA STEP workshop sessions. We're delighted you're here. My name is Annette and I'm in full recovery from an eating disorder. Before we get started, a few caveats. This session of the EDA STEP workshop is being recorded. We hope to make audio recordings of the workshop accessible to everyone. Please note that these audios will not be available on the EDA website until they've gone through the full vetting process. We will, however, be sending information about the recordings to the General Service Board email distribution list. If you're not currently on the list and you'd like to be, please drop a line to info@eatingdisordersanonymous.org and we'll get you added. If you're listening to this recording, please remember it's not a substitute for attending EDA meetings or working the steps. We encourage you to check out our meetings pages, which include face-to-face, online, and teleconference meetings. Just like what you might find at an EDA group, which you're about to hear reflects experiences and opinions of individual and EDA members. These may or may not tally with your own. Please take what you can use and leave the rest. You do not need a sponsor to attend this workshop. We'll all be working the steps of EDA together, myself included. To make things easier for everyone, we've muted you as you join in. If you'd like to be heard, please unmute your phone by using *6 or Alt-A if you're on a computer. You can mute and unmute using the same key combination. Because there are so many of us, we won't all get a chance to introduce ourselves. However, if you're speaking, please do tell us your first name and where you're from. I am so sorry about the unannounced time change last week. We knew it was coming. I'd posted the information on the EDA website when we started this series back in September, but then I forgot to announce it when it mattered the most. I'm really sorry about that. You have been hanging in there, have been awesome, and for remembering and for just tolerating the distress. So you who missed last week may also be feeling left a bit behind. That's so hard. Never fear, your experience is shared. I think most of us who have ever had an eating disorder know pretty much exactly what it feels like to be left out or left behind. We'll catch you up this week. Step 6 and Step 7 really go together. Last week we did discuss Step 6. Gisele led us through pages 167 to 172, and Ellen and I chimed in with our experiences. We answered some questions about Step 6, and then we took the step together. Tonight we're going to go ahead with Step 7. If you're falling behind, just do your best. Do the next right thing and hang in there. Remember, we're practicing patterns, not looking for perfection at anything. So let's keep pressing forward. In this workshop format, I can practically guarantee most everyone will be feeling behind at some point. It's a great opportunity to demonstrate flexibility and resilience. Tonight, we'll reflect on EDA Big Book from the bottom of page 172 halfway through page 179, and we'll also be talking about workshop worksheets page 27 and then referring back to page 26. We'll hear some of EDA's sponsors addressing questions sponsees often ask, and we'll complete page 26 the right side only. We'll describe character building exercises and we'll take Step 7 together. Right now, I'd like to ask if there's anyone on the call who sponsors others in EDA to identify yourself so we may call on you during the question and answer session. This doesn't imply that you're currently accepting new sponsees. However, if you are, that sure would be great to know. Please let us know your first name and city, please. *6 to unmute. Okay, well, here's Gisele.
Hi, I'm Gisele, recovered eating disorder. I'm from Maricopa.
And I know we have a few people who are not able to join as they would have because they've actually got other commitments that would have interfered. So I know on the East Coast we have people that are attending their children's dance recitals. If you do have a experience sponsoring and you'd like to answer the questions when we get to the Q&A section, please just chime in at that point. So at this point, we're going to go ahead with the reflections starting on page 172. Hold on, page down. Trying to get to, I'm hoping that this display is okay. And we be struggling. Okay, here we go. There we go. All right, so we covered the agenda. And now we're going to have a few reflections on the EDA Big Book. So, Gisele, did you want to start us off? So we can just really talk about kind of like what the point of this stuff is, because step 6 was all about kind of like being frustrated with like, no, we can't actually really fix ourselves. All these things that led to us using eating disorders as a way to kind of get perspective or comfort or escape from the stress of daily living. Well, you know what? When you take the eating disorder away, all that stuff's still there, right? Yuck. So that's kind of what step 6 is about, just being like, oh my gosh, I'm just as anxious, just as impatient, just as judgmental, just as like riddled with fear and resentment, self-pity, confusion, frustration, despair, all of that stuff that we wrote about. It's like I gave it all away, and guess what? It's still here to some later, lesser, or greater degree. That's where we recognize, oh, actually, we can't fix ourselves. And that's when we get ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And that's kind of where we're at with step 7, is we humbly ask God to remove all our defects of character. Well, that's not an easy matter. I know for myself, I really had a difficult time, and I had to realize that, no matter how hard I worked at it, I could no more free myself I couldn't will myself to be free of my defects any more than I could will myself to be free of my eating disorder. It's like I couldn't just make a decision and make it stick, even though that was like the thing I most wanted. I wanted it to be easy, and that was not my experience. But the key thing is that I do have, other capabilities. Other people have problems. I can solve problems. Other people have things that, they need to organize or get, it's like there were things that I could do, but when it applied to myself, I was clueless. And it wasn't just that, I'd have ideas, but I couldn't make them stick. And this is where our main concern now needs to be, how do we get out of our own way so we can turn our attention to the stuff that matters in the long run? Because, when you think about it, it's like, do I really matter in the long run? Well, I'd like to think so, but the reality is maybe not. So for this to make sense to me, I have to get out of my own way so I can be there, to do the things that I think matter in the long run, the context of the world as a whole, or, it can be little stuff. It can be like, care for my kids or the elderly folks in my family, or it could be, something that matters to me about peace and justice in the world, or, trying to reduce the amount of animal cruelty, or, something. And if I focus on that stuff, it kind of like, I do actually pay less attention to myself, but only if my basic needs are getting met. And where I got stuck a lot was that I expected other people to take care of that stuff for me. I expected my mother to treat me a particular way with respect, which I wasn't getting. And I expected my husband to treat me a specific way, which I got a lot of the time, but I wasn't focused on that. I was actually more focused on how it didn't meet my expectations. So it really kind of sucked. When I really started working this step, and I got to that point where it's like, became ready to have God remove all these character, I didn't trust that was ever going to work. How could anything outside of me do surgery and take away the stuff that it inhibited me? But I couldn't imagine that this was really, because it had never ever worked. And I didn't see it working a lot of people really, even though I would say it did. So, but what was brought to my attention is that it really isn't about like surgical removal of these defects of character. It's really more about just atrophy. Like the less we realize they are. And sort of like if you have some kind of an unwelcome extra appendage, you're not using it, it may just fall off from lack of use. So that's kind of part of it. The other part is we can use those very self-same defects in different ways. So recognizing and respecting what those defects really signify. Everything we have is really an asset, but really kind of exaggerated. Like we're people of extremes. So, when a little bit of something might be terrific, an excess amount of it might, whether that's medication or fundamental character, it's like perfectionism is like that. Perfectionism is good. You want to be consider it and pay attention to what excellence would really be in any particular situation. But perfectionism taken to an extreme, just throttles the life out of everything. It can really be misery in an extreme amount. And for me, perfectionism and this notion of what may um, a good person, a good mother, it's like I could never meet those criteria, and so perfectionism was killing me, and my idea of my just indignation over everything, because after all, I knew it was right. Privileging my own opinions was really killing me when I was active in my eating disorder, and even though I knew that my reactions and the ways I was thinking weren't right.
I can't hear you.
Hi, we can't hear you now.
Okay, so let's try this. Hello, can you hear us? Hi, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So good. And somehow we lost our ability to share and we're starting the part again. So apologies. And there we go.
We're doing this in a car.
Yeah, sorry. This is so ridiculous. It's like we've really made an effort to try and here we go. Yep. There we go.
It's still happening.
It's still happening. Yes, it is. So, Giselle's okay. Just to make it clear how much dedication is going into this. Giselle's work shift changed to something that she totally wasn't expecting. She didn't have any choice in the matter. So we're sitting outside the airport. She works at the airport in a running car so that our mobile hotspot doesn't die. Having this conversation together is kind of funny, but I'm really grateful for all of you guys for your patience with this process and with what we're trying to cover with you. I feel wonderful about this program and this process because it works, but oh my gosh, that doesn't mean that life is simple or that things go smoothly.
It's not perfect.
Or that we're no, it sure as heck isn't. Anyway, I'm about done talking about my part here, but and we've flipped forward several pages. I think I go up here. Okay, so the thing that that I had to recognize is that I couldn't actually change myself. I had to really focus on being useful, trying to put something greater than me, and that me turning it over to others and turning it over to my idea of higher purpose. And it wasn't an easy recognition, but what was great is that I didn't have to turn my life over to anything I didn't trust. So for me, that was a tough sell because it's like it says God, and I didn't really relate to this idea. I didn't have this fundamental idea of God deep down within me. It's in the text that every man, woman, and child has it. Well, not really, not every one of us, but that doesn't really mean that we can't work these steps. We can still find something greater than ourselves that gives us, perspective and context and meaning and purpose. And that's what we do. So for a lot of people, even people that end up in great faith and wonderful spiritual connection, they may not feel that in any given moment. And sometimes it just helps to remember that, okay, well, maybe I'm just in spaces where I can't make that connection, but I can still remember that I exist in a broader context and in my mind.
We can't hear you now.
Okay, it looks like somehow people are getting muted. I think that I can now be heard again. All right, yay, that's great. Getting there. Faster at it this time. Okay. All right, so it took a while for me to get that idea down, but it became easier and easier that really all I need to do is remember where I am in the whole context of things and do the next right thing. Gisele used to tell me, so what would you be doing if you felt better? And I would be like, I don't know. And it's like, well, figure out what it is, just do that. And you know what? That actually, it sounds like just fake it, it isn't really. It is you consciously making a decision about what should happen and just going like, you know, I'm not having a great time right now, but if I just do the next right thing, it will carry me through. It's sort of like if you're a car that's, you know, barreling down, you have to cross the grade, and if you halt, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't think my car can get over this thing on a bridge. You know, it's like not willing to. But if you build up a head of steam and you just kind of, you know, you're willing to, like, okay, you know, the physics of this particular thing, if I'm going at this speed and the distance I have to jump is only, you know, 10 feet, and will literally just slow it. If you have a little ramp, don't try this at home. But, you know, I imagine that in my head. It's like, well, maybe I'm at that point where I know I actually need to just, you know, carry on, keep calm, carry on. It'll all be okay. And that's what a reliance on a higher purpose or a power or a God can do for you. It will carry you in the moments where you are the weakest. So the key thing about step 7 is that we can actually use the defect we have, the perfectionism, the stubbornness, the judgmentalism, the anxiety, you know, to actually help inform us about what the next right thing we should do is. And that's where we're kind of doing the actual letting go, peeling our fingers, you know, prying our fingers off of the defects and forcing ourselves to focus on how to leverage what makes us most uncomfortable to get healthier. So we find we can leverage the pain of our defects to good purpose, replacing old thoughts with new. And so I now lost my place here. I wanted to turn this over to see if there's any other sponsors that have joined who would care to reflect on pages 172 to 179. Because I'm going to tell you a few examples of how that works. So in my step 6, I listed some of those very same things that you just heard. So I really do suffer a lot from workaholism, you know, which is kind of like dedicating myself to this idea of serving the greater good. That can really it can look ill if taken to extremes. And sometimes if other things are uncomfortable, I will retreat to that, which is really a cop-out in terms of my relationships with human beings. So I do that. Anxiety. So a lot of the reasons that I do the workaholism thing is because it creates an environment of financial security, if nothing else. But yeah, but that's one thing that showed up on the list. Judgmentalism, I mean, that's been coming up big time lately, and impatience is also one of the things that has surfaced yet again. So what does that really mean? It's like when I think of those characteristics, there's a part of me that's just like depressed and despairing. It's like, oh God, I'm never going to get better. And, you know, it feels really like stuck at times. It's like the workaholism thing, it keeps surfacing and then I keep batting it away and, you know, it keeps coming back. I'm like, dang it, you again. But the truth is that there's really great stuff about, you know, the stubbornness and the determination. And I have actually made really good choices just in the last 6 months to decrease the amount of likelihood that I'm going to continue to engage in the workaholic behavior. And that's fantastic. I'm very proud of myself. But the truth is, anxiety undergirds most of my crappy behavior. Well, anxiety is there's a lot of fantastic things about anxiety. It means that I'm paying attention. It's like there wouldn't be any sentient life if people didn't have fear, or if, you know, animals or anything. If we don't have the awareness to know what's going on around us and some degree of concern about what that means, we would never take care of the right things. We would never pay the bills. I mean, it's like that some level of anxiety around that stuff is important. Some level of concern for the way people regard us is also important, because otherwise we wouldn't form good relationships, you know? So anxiety is really just basic, you know, impulse of awareness taken a few steps too far. So if I dial it back by calming down, and how do I do that? Putting things in context, doing my 10th step, remembering what matters, focusing on what's going right. You know, there's all these good things that I can do with anxiety, and leveraging my anxiety to help make things better. So I do that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was like the perfectionism, because that keeps coming up for lots of people. I think almost everybody that has an eating disorder has that to some degree or another. And what I wanted to say about it is, like, you know, I looked at that and I kept feeling terrible. But when I looked at, well, what did perfectionism do for me? Because I mean, I didn't want to let it go. I'm like, no, I know what right is. I know how this should be. I know how you're supposed to do this particular task, and I want it done right. And it really helped to remember that the fundamentals of perfectionism are really rooted in something that's like, you know, competence. It's like just being good at stuff. It requires you to know what excellent means. Well, that's a good thing, right? So when I dialed back my anxiety about my perfectionism and became willing to go like, actually, this is a good thing. It's just like I'm just investing too much in it. All of a sudden, a lot of things got easier. And I was applying my perfectionism to other people. And this is a horror show, right? I mean, I wrote about that in my 4th step. It's like, well, I'm holding these people to these standards that even I can't live up to. Well, like, what the heck is wrong with that? Well, like everything, right? But the perfectionism part was, you know, I wanted people to treat me a specific way. I wanted, you know, this person to do that and this other person to not do this other thing. And so I'm holding them to a standard because I think I know what's right. And, you know, it's important for me to reflect on the fact that I do know a lot of what is good and right. And I can continue to value and trust those basic principles. There's nothing wrong with that at all. What gets weird is that what I should be doing is encouraging and helping other people to reflect on how things are going right for them. Finding the parts of, like, this was a great exercise I did, you know, with my husband, was to really focus on engaging with him, which can be uncomfortable, because he can be really sarcastic, and you know, and he was really sarcastic when I was really being brutal with the perfectionism. So it got a lot better when I used the perfectionism to ferret out the things that he was doing well. And holy crap, he does lots of things really well, and he's really considerate and loving and kind. And you know, when I was focusing on that and how well he matched my ideals, it's like my whole relationship did a 180. So all of these things that we have that can be evil, taken to an extreme, can also be used for good. And that's where the exercise at the top of page 27 kind of comes into play. It's like, what is a character building exercise that we could do that would help us with our 2 most significant defects? Well, for me, you know, it was using my perfectionism differently. It was, you know, really reflecting on how I could use my anxiety to actually pick out pieces that I needed to actually take and engage with in a kind of a small, limited risk-taking way, so that I could begin to, you know, have conversations that were really uncomfortable with one of my sons who was doing things that I absolutely couldn't bear to talk about. Well, I made myself do it in tiny increments. Did that mean that we ended up having wonderful conversations? No, it did not. But it meant that I lost my fear of this substantially. And so using the anxiety as sort of a prod, or using the character defect as a prod to move us in the right direction, really helped change the dynamic of that relationship. So what did that do? That made it less and less likely that I would need to resort to my eating disorder to escape the horror show that my relationship looked like with that particular individual. So anyway, I've done plenty of talking here, and we're not going to go into this worksheet thing just yet. If ever anybody else has thoughts about step 7, because I used to hate step 7. It was like the worst step for me. Now I love it, because it's really about, it's not about like, well, your terrible things are balanced by some amazing, wonderful properties. It's like, on balance, you're fine. It's not like that at all. It's more like what you have, exactly who you are and exactly how you are, is actually perfect. It's just like exactly where we're at in our lives, what we have to learn how to kind of operate in a zone of comfort in a world that is uncomfortable. It's like taking a leap of faith into recognizing that you're exactly how you need to be, and it's just a matter of degree and balance of using the characteristics that you have already either that you were born with or that you have built over time. You know, it's not that easy to change behaviors, but incrementally, a teeny bit, a little bit at a time, which is how we do everything in recovery. It gets better, and it builds. It does. I didn't think it was ever going to get better. I didn't think my characteristics, some of them have actually like really radically changed, and I love it. It's really been free. So I'm going to give somebody else a chance to chat, and I want to see who's on the phone who might be interested in connecting and also speaking to this. And Gisele actually looks like she might be reaching for.
Oh,
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, here you go.
Hi, this is Gisele. I was as she was talking, I was just thinking about something I read in the pages was it was talking about humiliation and just humbly asking God to remove all these defects of character and staying away from the feeling humiliated about it, because there's some things that I have, like one of the things is that I strongly used was manipulation, and I was really good at it. And when I started having to look at all my stuff, looking at all my character defects and the real me, I was kind of humiliated. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated, and I could have sunk down into that hole. But I need to stay away from that. It already is. These character defects, they already are. And so looking at them only helps me to identify and have the ability to change it. I was looking at the manipulation, and I was like thinking, okay, what can I put to the right of that? I don't know. The ability to really be able to look at people, because manipulation is all about, looking at people and seeing what I can get. Well, now I can look at that and go, okay, now I can look at people and go, okay, well, what's their real story, and what can I maybe do for them? Because that's this. Annette was saying that this is all about connecting and connecting with humanity, connecting with people around us, and these character defects, like she said, in the extreme negative way, keeps me from that, because all I'm focused on is me, and I hate that. I don't like it when it's all about me, and those are one of my red flags. When I'm so focused on me, I know I'm not getting my needs met. I'm on that three-legged chair that's unbalanced, and I need to get back to basics so that I can, take care of me, so I can actually be outside myself. And that's what all these character defects, looking at them really does, is just, I don't know, helps me get out of me. And when I do that, I'm so much happier. I'm at peace, and I'm okay in my own skin. And it's just those little things, those little exercises, and I've told my kid, when I'm so in my funk, when she was in her funk and everything, just when you're at the grocery store, just make a connection with somebody. You're looking over the cheese and what type of cheese, and you make eye contact with somebody, and you make a comment, and you see that connection in the eye, and it's like, okay, it's still there. And I think that's really awesome. But anyway, it's easy to get stuck in that humiliation mode when you're looking at the character defects. And I urge us to give ourselves some grace in it, because I used manipulation for, I don't know, my whole life. And it takes a long time to look at those and change them. But it does happen. And like Lynette said, it happens little bits. And then when I was in the midst of my changing, it would happen in, I call them little sprickets of time. And it does get better, and I do see progress, and you will see progress. And I'll give you back to Annette, or anybody else that wants to jump in.
Star 6 to unmute if you have any comments about this, or I'm just going to go right back into talking about the book. And then we'll go. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I've found that reframing how I think about defects is sometimes helpful. Like one of my biggest defects always has been procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
And about the time I got chronic fatigue syndrome, I discovered procrastination was actually a great skill area, that I had an enormous ability that I called procrastination and beat myself up over to prioritize. And once I started thinking about myself not as a procrastinator, but as a prioritizer, I could actually make good out of it. Because then it helped me think of it in a way where I could sort what was most important at any given point in time. And now I find myself, when I talk to people, I'm forever just saying, I hear somebody say something negative about themselves, and I automatically reframe it for them, in a way where they can see a positive aspect of what they have done. And I find myself doing that for myself too, because one thing I learned in my Al-Anon experience is that nothing ever got better from beating myself up over it. And that includes my defects. I can only try to act the best I can right now in this moment. And especially, I think, in the 6th and 7th steps, the one day at a time, the 1 second at a time, living completely in the present comes into play really big time. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And that was Bonnie. Where are you at, Bonnie?
I'm in Auburn, California.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for contributing. That was fantastic. And I love that, because that's what procrastination really, that's a perfect example. People call it lazy, we put all kinds of like negative labels. Sloth, it's like slothful behavior. It's one of the 7 deadlies, right? But truthfully, I teach lean process and agile stuff for software developers. And honestly, it's like deciding as late as possible and then doing things as fast as possible is totally like efficient. It's great. And so honestly, that impulse to avoid doing things is actually very wise. All right, so that was a great example. I wanted to also reflect what Gisele said about humility and humiliation was an important point that we do cover in the EDA text on page 175. Actually, throughout a lot of this section, we do talk about it, because we do tend to be kind of brought to our knees by all of these defects that we're of character. We're using more modern language, just sort of like, ways in which we have character concerns. And so a lot of what we do is brings us to a position of humility, which for most of us doesn't sound like a wonderful thing. I mean, I remember the first time I ran into that, I was thinking, wow, Mother Teresa, it's like, I can't aspire to that. That's ridiculous. It's, and it doesn't also reflect the things that I thought that I actually did bring to the table. But it turns out that humility is really, and it says this at the top of page 175, having a modest view of our own importance relative to things that matter in the long run. That actually frees us to experience life on an altogether different plane. With humility, we're not called upon to defend our ideas or positions. We're much less likely to offend or take offense. We can make useful contributions without drawing attention to ourselves. We can get our feelings hurt without needing to launch a counterattack. We need not rush about. There is plenty of time. We can be thoughtful and well considered in our responses to life's provocations and opportunities, and thus we can be far more effective and influential than ever before. We now realize that our character, integrity, and purpose matter far more than our day-to-day happiness and our relationships with others than any achievement we could have imagined. We begin to appreciate humility as the necessary and vital frame of reference rather than some unpleasant condition to which we must regularly be reduced. And, the point of that is that actually, if I'm not focused on me and I'm focused on, rather than what I can get, what I can give, it really changes the dynamic. And I loved what you said, Bonnie, about like now you reframe it for people. It's like, yes, that is wisdom. And this is like, I'm old now, and I'm loving that part because I can literally do that for other people, and it gives me such joy to actually, it helps people have a good day. So, all right, thanks so much for that. Anybody else want to share a reflection on step 7? Because then we're gonna go to the panel. Whoever wants to chime in on the panel questions. All right, let's go to the panel because we have an exercise. We're gonna do some writing. Here's our questions.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Sure.
Yeah,
Please go.
should I ask a question of the panel? How can you reframe gossip to as a character defect to serve the greater good or whatever?
I can tell you gossip. I'm good at this.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that question. It's a great question. Gossip is really about wanting and desiring a close connection. That's a special relationship with one or maybe a few people. Gossip is about like sharing a secret. So it's really, it's about having it's really about relationships. It's like if you want to gossip with somebody, it's partially about judgment, so you can take that as a separate thing, but the reason that we gossip is really about forming like an inner circle of trusted confidants. So that part is really wonderful, and really you can think about this as like how much you really value those connections, and then you can think about how to use that desire for connection differently, so to build people up instead of pulling people down. Yeah. Does that make sense? Great question.
I have a question.
Yeah,
I
please go
guess
ahead.
so, yeah.
Great.
I'm still not fully understanding why we want to reframe the character defects.
Why we what?
Can you repeat the question? We're having trouble hearing you.
Yes, I'm not fully understanding why we want to reframe the character defects into positive things.
So that we don't get stuck on them. So the thing is that I don't know if you've experienced this in the way you think about yourself, but we often have such negative ideas about who we are and what we can contribute to the world, and it's easy to get kind of weighed down by the enormity of the awfulness of who we are. And it's important for us actually to focus on what's right, not only in ourselves, but in the world around us. And that is, it's like that negativity, the looking at everything through a lens darkly is very much tied to why it is we have to self-soothe with using an eating disorder or using behaviors or even obsessive thinking. It's because we're busy, it's like I find myself, I don't use food, but it's like if I find myself doing internet stuff for distraction purposes, that's a signal to me. It's a red flag because it's telling me that I'm looking at something fearfully when I really should be looking at like gosh, here's this opportunity that I could, really shine at. I could be thinking about things positively instead of negatively. And so it's important for us to look at our defects or the things that we have thought about ourselves in negative terms, because we do need to reframe it so that we can feel light about ourselves instead of heavy.
When you take something away, you want to, and this Gisele, I was just thinking, when you take something away, you're wanting to get rid of these character defects, you have to replace it with something. And that's another reason why you just want to reframe it, because you want to replace it. And like she said, it's not all negative. The character defect of anxiety or whatever, that can just be reframed and turned into good. It's not that these were all bad things. It's just they were used to extremes or just used in a wrong way. And so we just reframe it so it can be a positive to ourselves and to others around us.
Can you do selfishness, please?
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions.
Yes.
Sure. But, selfishness is super important because without it, we wouldn't take care of basics. So a lot of the things that I was really down on myself, it's like, I have such expectations, everything has to be, I'm high maintenance, so some of that is really about, me not having done good self-care. It's like, I'm not very selfish if I'm taking care of basics, if I'm getting enough to eat, if I'm focusing on, investing in my important relationships, if I'm remembering to do the things that are important for my health, eating well, going to doctors on a semi-regular, I'm terrible at that. If I'm taking care of basics, I don't find that I'm nearly as selfish. It's like I can actually turn my attention to other things. If I'm not taking care of myself, not consciously making an effort to create an environment that is reasonably safe and, provides me with reasonable challenge, if I don't have that kind of safety, it all becomes about me. It's like, and that, what's good about that is my signal that, oh, okay, actually, I need to take care of myself as if I was a child. Because, frankly, when we take care of children and, whether, regardless of what our role is with respect to them, we have to think that, it's like we do this because they don't know how to do it for themselves. Mm-hmm. But then when we're adults, are we really even treating ourselves with the same kind of dignity and grace we would offer a small child? And oftentimes the answer is just like, no. Why not? Well, that's why we end up being selfish. We try to get other people to meet these needs that we ourselves are actually responsible for. Selfishness is your signal that, hey, there's something you need to do for yourself to take care of basic needs. And if you have like demands of others that aren't really basic, like my expectations for what my husband should do, be, say, all that crap, you know what? That was my signal for stuff to work on. That was the excess portion that I now need to figure out how to turn around and leverage differently.
Is this the only place in the EDA program where you look at character assets?
Well, no. I mean, so I think when we reflect on step 10, we're also thinking about how to, how do I use this uncomfortable negative thing in some other way when we're working on resolutions. So we work on resolutions in step 4 and step 10. When we're in step 11, we're really looking at how do I serve that which is greater than myself, that matters to me, that I feel this sense of connection to. When we're talking about step 12, we're really carrying a message and living these principles in our lives. We're really using all of us and putting it on the firing line of life, as it says in the AA text. We're putting ourselves out there to be of service. That's really using everything we have. So, okay, great. I wanted to get through the questions, so let's talk about the questions. This one is, it's almost Thanksgiving, and my relationship with food isn't any better than my relationship with my in-laws. How can I make things safer for myself?
Anybody have anything?
Hi, this is Ellen from Texas.
Hey, Ellen, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thanks. I think one of the things that is important anytime that the holiday times come up is to have a safety plan in place. And one of the things that I did in early recovery was what I called bookending, where if I was going to be going to a particular event, I would make sure that I checked in with somebody in recovery before I went to the event that I went to, and then I would also check in with somebody after I went to the event. And then, I would also, I would also let somebody know that I was going to be there. So, if I needed to make a call in between, that would be available for me to do. And I think that also one of the things that's important for me to remember as a person in recovery is to focus on whatever the positive is. whatever I can bring to the situation. Sometimes it's really easy to get so caught up in, all of the details about the celebration and the food, and sometimes it's easy to kind of panic around that kind of stuff. But I think it's also important to be able to remember that that I can actually bring something positive to the situation that I'm coming to. That I can bring an attitude of gratitude and just show up as the person that I want to be. And so anyway, those are just a couple of ideas that I have. Thanks.
Hi, this is Gisele. Just to piggyback on you, you brought up a really good point of and it's just the ability to just be. And my expectations get in the way of my ability to just show up and just be. I don't know what I was expecting. My expectations used to kick me in the butt because, I don't know about you, but my family is very dysfunctional. And if we all show up in the same place, there's going to be something happening because it's just, and so my expectations were that they're going to somehow be different, and that somehow I'm going to control the situation, and somehow I'm going to make things right. Well, no, I'm not. I have to stay within my own lane. I can only control what's in front of my face. I can only be what I am, and I have to accept what I am, and just be, like you said, just show up and be. And I used to never be able to accept, be comfortable in my own skin. And that's what recovery has given me, is that ability to be comfortable and just be in any situation. I don't have to be all out there and exuberant and be the life of the party, but I can be, and I can be accepting and accepted. And that's all I wanted. And that has changed over the years. And I am extremely happy for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gisele. Thanks, Ellen. One thing I wanted to mention about this too is that I used to put a lot of stock in what other people thought of me, and it's hard not to. But the thing that we have to remember is that if we're leaning on our idea of God or higher power or higher purpose, and we're not looking to others for validation, it makes life just a ton easier, and it makes it easier to have a sense of humor, because it's like, oh my gosh, it's like when we all get together and focus on the things that are amazing about the connections we have with each other. It's like, I used to dread Thanksgiving. I used to just loathe it, because it's like, people had to behave in a specific way, and you had to wear clothes that were uncomfortable, and then everybody was looking at your whatever, and it's like my mother is very focused on appearance, and there was all that, and it became a very different event when it became not about me, but about like, what am I, it's like just thinking about the kind of the way that we laugh at the same things, or it's like, just being fascinated with, one person's specific, just goes on and on about, because we would talk about this afterwards. Like my husband and I would be like, oh my gosh, that was like 37 minutes of one topic, it's like, I didn't think that could ever happen. And I'm like, well, probably because I can do that too. But I just having a sense of like, it can be warm and friendly and just not self-focused in these events. And so when I go, like Ellen said, be the best we can be, and don't make it about me. And if other people want to make it about me, that's not about me, that's about them. So, if I just go and try to enjoy what I can, and it's about the connection. So
take what you want and leave
take
the rest.
what you want and leave the rest. Yeah. Yay. All right. So
a little bit on this topic, if I could.
Sure, yeah. Please go ahead.
I usually don't do Thanksgivings anymore because I'm too chemically sensitive to do things in groups. But I do go out with relatives a lot for different meals at restaurants. And I have found that the key for me in not having a problem with food when I go out to lunch or have any kind of event with people and that involves food as part of the celebration is to remind myself that the reason I'm there is not the food. It's to be with people I love. And if I focus on the love I have for these people and focus on the things I love about them and like about them, and luckily my relationships with my family are all pretty good right now. But if I've had a negative experience with them, like the old dysfunctions have come up, or one sister has gotten into a real judgmental phase, which is kind of trying, I focus on what I like about her. You know, I focus on how sharing and good and outgoing she is. And that way I'm looking at the good. I'm not always focused on what's horrible is going on. And I'm also not thinking about me at all, which helps.
Thank you, Bonnie. That's fantastic. I love that. We're going to go through the rest of the questions because I'm aware that the time is ticking. So the next one, I think we already addressed to some extent. Yeah, so I read the material, but I still don't understand how selfishness is a good thing. Since doing my 4th step, I feel like everything I do is selfish and I feel terrible about it. How can I look at this differently? Well, yeah, it does feel, it's like we feel especially raw. I think, you know, when you work through the steps, it's like it's just peeling back all of those protective layers that you've been wearing for however long. And it feels naked, you know, it just does. And it feels like everything you do, you know, is under this microscopic lens. And I remember thinking when I got to step 6 and 7, it's like, oh my God, am I going to have to like apply the same, like, inspected microscopic kind of, rigor to everything now? And I was miserable. And the truth is, no, the selfishness does dissipate. It's like as we invest in doing character building exercises and really focusing on what's good and right and positive, and being willing to tolerate the parts that aren't so amazing, they do get better. It's funny. And it's like, and you'll see how those same characteristics that you used to think were limiting don't have to be at all. So it's the selfishness does point out what we need to do next if we're listening. Next question. What are some good character building exercises for anxiety and judgmentalism? Well, I mentioned one with anxiety before, which is basically like use that as a prod to outline things that are uncomfortable that you can have yourself do, like going to Thanksgiving. And like Ellen said, bracketing them with helpful, supportive conversations with people that you know and trust, or with other safety kinds of things, like I like turning on music really loud in the car, or, you know, things that are scary. I like to do things that I find soothing and supportive before and after. I'll talk to my husband, or I'll talk to a sponsee, or do something that reminds myself of who I am. So judgmentalism, a good character exercise for judgmentalism is to, again, use the negative thought, like, you know, I might just think, that's ridiculous. You know, how could you be so selfish? And look at, okay, what about that relationship is provoking that? Well, it might be that I'm expecting something. Clearly it is. But so the judgmentalism is me looking at somebody with an expectation. And so to counter that, it would be to go and satisfy their expectations as an explicit thing silently. And I do that. I try to go and be the daughter that my mother needs. I try to go and be the mother that my son doesn't want but needs. You know, it's like, it's really trying to think, you know, like Gisele was saying about, you know, manipulation is the ability to kind of see somebody and know how their mind works and what they need. Well, using that in a positive way, and using the judgmentalism as a way to like think how to be helpful. So turning that kind of around. And the last question, and I'm trying to run through these things because I know we have exercises. I'm sorry. The last question was, I don't feel much better yet. Shouldn't I be feeling some kind of relief by now? When did you all start feeling better? I'm going to turn that over to Gisele.
Well, it goes back to the thing where it's going to come in gradual. Shouldn't I be feeling relief now? Well, maybe as we go through these exercises and you notice, part of the thing is being aware, because we've stuffed things, we've been in denial, we've not wanted to see. So one of the things that we're doing now is we're being aware. And I might not catch something, like I might not catch that I'm being judgmental and I'm hurting people, or I'm hurting myself in the beginning, but I may start catching it. And just that is an awareness, that ability to see, that your willingness, and that I never had the willingness. I had to pray for the willingness to be willing, because I didn't have it. And so just that willingness to see is a huge stepping stone. Pat yourself on the back. Just to have that ability to see it is huge. And then to be able to start making changes about it, that's huge. And so yes, you will start feeling better. You will start seeing changes. But it comes down, for me, it came down to a choice. Do I really want to? Do I really want to give these things up? And that's where this being vulnerable came into play. It's like it's uncomfortable to be vulnerable, but that's the only way I was going to make any changes. And it's some of these are hard pills to swallow. These things about these things about myself were really hard to swallow, but I had to know that they were already there. Now that I'm just aware of them, I just need to accept and be willing. And that's what I have on that.
Thanks, Gisele. It's always really great to hear your perspectives. And anybody else? And you are.
Never.
Well, okay, so for me, I didn't start feeling better. It's like in the EDA big book, just like in the AA big book, it's like, it says that, we'll be amazed before I don't think the EDA book says amazed, because that just sounds like, it sounds too much like a commercial. But the thing is that before we're halfway through the 9th step, and we're only on step 7, and we're still in the midst of like roiling around with our character defects. So that's actually a great segue to our next thing, which is on our worksheet. We list our 2 most significant character defects, and we think of what might counter them. So we've already talked through that a little bit, some examples of how to look at procrastination. And it's like, well, actually, no, that's about making use it. It's about setting priorities. It's about like figuring out what's important and what's maybe not so important in any given moment, and privileging that we do need rest and we do need time to reflect and build relationships.
Does anybody have another one?
Yeah, is there another one that we can, but how to use that in a positive way? It's like, well, helping other people recognize when they're making good decisions and prioritizing. That's a fantastic thing to do. Does anybody else have examples that we can talk through? Okay, then we're just going to write for about 1 minute. We're going to write like 2 of our most significant character defects and 1 thing that we can do to leverage that defect in a more positive way. So one example, I'm going to just use one, is jealousy. So it's been rare in my life to be stricken with insane jealousy, but when I was, it was like, shockingly, like I couldn't breathe. It was so bad. And I was just floored by this horror show of a new defect that I didn't even know I was ever gonna have. I was like, no, what new horrible thing is now happening? And I thought, because I was in recovery, and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do with this thing? And I thought, well, actually the jealousy means that's exactly how significant this relationship is to me. It's like, oh my God, I genuinely, I treasure this relationship, is like the world to me. And looking at that differently and just thinking, okay, so what does that person really need to have? What is that? What does that entail? Like to really reflect on. And yeah, so hang on, we're in the middle of
Do you
the
have
media
a permit to
presentation.
park in here?
I don't. Hang on. Giselle's dealing with this. Okay, yeah.
What are you doing here?
So we're recording something, and there's somebody that just came in to interrupt us. But anyway, that was entertaining.
You're fine.
Okay, great.
Carry
So
on.
it was a coworker. We're parked in a lot. But anyway, so but the key thing about jealousy was actually it gave me opportunity to think about what did that need to be, and it really meant a partnership in which I could help my husband focus on things that were going to grow him as a human being and give him the opportunity to explore things that scared me. And I thought, I never imagined that I would be able to do that. But you know what? My recognition and my character building, exercises around that were really about encouraging him to do the things that scared me the most. and I don't mean like go have affairs, but I mean there was other things that he could do that would take his time away from me, and I thought that was valuable. All right, so everybody's had time to write while I've been busy blathering on, so I want everybody to turn back to page 26. So on page 26, you have a list of character defects that you've written down. And on the other side, on the right-hand side, you have blank space. And I want you to take just 1 minute and write down one thing next to your defect that you think is a positive aspect of it. So I mentioned some for things like anxiety and perfectionism and judgmentalism even, because that's discernment. Judgmentalism is like I can discern, and I actually, have a sense of like, no, it's not all morally relative. There's right and there's wrong in certain areas. That's not a bad thing. Discernment. Another one. So impatience. A good quality about impatience is I will respond and act quickly in any kind of situation where there's something that needs to be done. And patience is actually a really positive trait. It's responsiveness. Let's think of another one. Anybody out there have one that they're having trouble with?
Hi, this is Holly. I have one that I'm having trouble with. Suppressing feelings or emotional suppression.
I like that. I think we all do that. But you know what that is? That is like, to me, that is the ability to tolerate uncomfortability. So you know what? Really, a lot of being an adult is about finding balance and sort of like being able to table things until later. The ability to defer and deflect and like have the ability to put things on back burner so you can deal with them later. That is fantastic. Adulting. You still have to deal with stuff later, though. Does that help?
That is extremely helpful. I've always thought of myself as somebody who can't handle discomfort. You have just changed my life. Thank you so much. Yay! Wow.
That's cool.
It's the little things.
It is. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Jess from Phoenix. How about dishonesty?
Whoa, dishonesty is fantastic because we lie for a reason. And looking at what those reasons are, it is like manipulation, but lying is changing the reality. It's like saying the reality isn't good enough. And so what is that? That is you exercising, it's like you have the creative ability to come up with a better alternative. That is really creativity. And it is also your idea. It's like you have an idea of what you're like, a vision of what you want.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What about resentment?
resentment is actually, to me, when I feel resentment, a lot of it is about expectations that didn't get met, and to me, it is another form of like selfishness in the sense of I deserve to get something. It's willingness to stand up for my own rights.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, this is Gisele. Annette is a rock star at this, and I'm sure she will continue with this because I'm serious. At the workshop we had, she was a rock star at this. So I urge you to challenge her. But I have to go take care of me and go eat something before I go to work. So I thank you all for being here. Love you.
Okay, thanks, Gisele. And you know what? We are actually out of time, and I want to thank Gisele and thank everybody. And we're going to take the 7th step, and Gisele's already done this. But so what we want to do here is make sure that we have an opportunity to really reflect and ask other people for help with these things. I will have a few minutes after we wrap for the day. If other people have things that they want to bring up and just talk through, that's totally fine. But the only reason I'm any good at this at all, I got to tell you, because I sucked at it, is just working with other people and looking at myself again and again. And it's like, oh God, this new horrible. and so, and I can laugh about it now, which is one of the best things ever because I was like humorless. Anyway, so God can use us as we are. Your higher purpose, higher power can use you exactly as you are. And that doesn't mean that we're perfection incarnate. It means that we have raw material that is really pretty functional in almost every case. And even if you're not, and you're completely sidelined by these things, our ways of thinking about the world and our place in it are entirely malleable. We can actually change them. That's what letting go and letting God is all about. So even for people who don't have faith, this is completely possible in the context of whatever it is that you really trust and what really matters to you. So are you ready to get out of the way and let God decide how to use your capabilities, good and bad? I am.
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So we're going to take step 7 together. You guys ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. We're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. And that was step 6. And now step 7. Humbly ask God to
remove our shortcomings
of character. Thank you. Hooray! Step 6 and 7 go together. They do. All right. So, I'm sorry, I know we're a little out of time. We want to finish writing your step 7 prayer or step 7 commitment or both. Write it out again in your own words as succinctly as possible on page 27. Keep that handy. It's like, even if you're not somebody that recites things in the mirror every day, it's like have something that reminds you of that sort of commitment to just, you know what, let go, focus on what's going right, kind of put things back in context. That's what step 7 is all about. When you're feeling down, you're feeling caught up in your own stuff, it's like, nope, you know what, there's an answer out there, and all we have to do is show up and do the next right thing. Okay, so focusing on our step 8 preparations. Next week, we're going to be doing step 8. We're going to read the EDA Big Book, pages 179 through 181. Man, that's short. I think that's the shortest section we have. And then complete step 8 workshop worksheets, pages 28 and 29. Okay, this is the end of our officially recorded session, but I would like to go ahead and take questions if anybody has them.
My quick one is next week is Thanksgiving. Are we still meeting?
Yeah, no, we're not. So thanks for bringing that up. The next week is November 22nd is Thanksgiving in the US, and we will not be meeting on November 22nd. We're going to pick right back up on November 29th, or I think that's right, 29th. Thursday the 29th. Great question. Thanks so much. And I will send out a note about that when I send out the video link. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording, but if anybody has questions or any feedback, things that they want to talk through, I'm available for a few more minutes. And maybe others can be too. I'm not like special.
Annette, this is Holly again. Are
Holly?
So you helped me out with the suppressing feelings with looking at the other side of that, but I'm